Okay, so welcome to the Damon Runyon St. Jude Pediatric Cancer Research Fellowship Virtual Info Session. This info session is to help potential applicants or administrators who are supporting potential applicants so that you can put forth the best application that's possible. And we're very excited to present some of the information to you today. And we have several committee members as well as awardees present to talk to you. So let me quickly introduce myself. My name is Megan Allen. I'm the scientific director at Damon Runyon. In the room, we have some other Damon Runyon staff, as well as the president and CEO, Dr. Young Lee, who was a former fellow herself. We have Claire Cahill. She's the Chief Administrative Officer of Damon Runyon. And so if you're sending emails, you will be sending them to either Claire or myself or some of our other support staff. In the room, we also have 3 committee members who will be reviewing your application, and they're here to give you some advice. So we welcome Dr. Andrew Kung. He is the chair of the Damon Runyon St. Jude Pediatric Cancer Research Fellowship Award Committee, and professor at Memorial Sloan Kettering. We also have Dr. Mark Hatley, who is a professor at St. Jude Children's Research Hospital. And then lastly, we have Dr. Jeff McGee, who is a professor at Washington University School of Medicine. And then lastly, we have 2 current awardees, and they'll be happy to share their experiences with you today. So we have Costanza Locascio from Dana-Farber. And then we also have Phil Powerstein from University of California, San Francisco with us today. Okay. So to kick us off, I'm going to start with sort of a brief overview of Damon Runyon Cancer Research Foundation, and then give some background into why and how the award was started. So first, to sign up to receive information about all Damon Runyon Awards programs, you can sort of quickly take a picture of this QR code and it will send you to a SurveyMonkey where you can put in your email address. I'll show this at the very end of the slideshow as well. So Damon Runyon Cancer Research Foundation, our mission has been to fund high-risk, high-reward cancer research. And we identify and enable young scientists who are brilliant, brave, and bold enough to go where others haven't. And so who is Damon Runyon? Who was Damon Runyon? How did we get our name? So it kind of all boiled down to a solid friendship. So Damon Runyon is the famous playwright who wrote Guys and Dolls, and he was best friends with Walter Winchell. And Walter Winchell is coined with sort of being the inventor of gossip journalism. So TMZ before there was TMZ. And so Walter Winchell was deeply affected by his best friend Damon Runyon's death from throat cancer. And so he started the Damon Runyon Cancer Research Foundation shortly after his death. Today, we are a public charity that raises donations from across the nation to support cancer research. And so since our inception in 1946, Damon Runyon has funded close to 4,000 scientists with an investment of nearly $450 million. This year, we commit to give close to $20 million across 8 distinct award programs. And if you look here, I'm sorry to brag a little, but we're very proud of our former awardees. So we're very lucky to count that we have 13 former Damon Runyon awardees who have gone on to win the Nobel Prize, 41 National Academy of Medicine members. We have 97 National Academy of Science members, 7 National Medal of Science winners, and 15 Lasker Award winners. And so our impact is also multifaceted and bridges several research domains. And so I'm sorry that this slide is so wordy, but it's just meant to sort of give you a taste of sort of how our awardees impact society through their research. So there's this domain here of therapeutic innovation, and our awardees have been critical in getting several drugs to market. There's technological innovation, as well as several former awardees have started biotech companies. And this is not an exhaustive list, it's just to highlight some of the ones that are more well-known. And so who funds Damon Runyon? The funding comes from individual donors, scientific companies, and elite nonprofits who help support our programs. We partner with Howard Hughes Medical Institute, as well as Merck, and then another nonprofit funder, the Mark Foundation for Cancer Research, for example, as well as many others. And quite notably, and something that we're always highlighting here at the foundation, is that 100% of all donations are used to fund cancer research. And so we also have the biotech and pharma companies like Merck that understand how crucial your work is to the development of next generation therapies, as well as obviously the other nonprofits that we partner with. And so what are we funding? So our award programs support the entire spectrum of cancer research, from basic research through translational research, and then even investigator-initiated clinical trials. And so here is sort of a sampling of some of our awards that fit into these buckets. We have our fellowship programs that fund postdoctoral fellows under basic research, as well as a little bit of translational. We have our assistant professor awards here, the Innovation Award, for example, and the Clinical Investigator Award. And then lastly, in this bucket, these are mainly for physician scientists who are transitioning through to instructor and or assistant professor awards, or sorry, positions. Most recently, we introduced the Scholars Program for Advancing Research and Knowledge, and that supports post-baccalaureate researchers who work in a current or former Damon Runyon scientist lab. And to look at that, the flip side of it, of our programs, our award programs support researchers at nearly every transition point in an academic career. So if you look at if you're a recent graduate of a bachelor's degree within the last 36 months, we have the Scholars Program for Advancing Research and Knowledge. If you're a postdoc, we have 3 main fellowship awards. And then we also have the Damon Runyon Dale Fry Award for Breakthrough Science. And that's sort of a transition award. After your Damon Runyon Fellowship is over, you can apply for, this while you're a fellow, but this helps you start your independent assistant professor career. We also have awards for physician scientists specifically, as well as assistant professors. And so thinking about who we're funding, so since our inception in 1946, the mission has been to fund early career investigators with pioneering new ideas. And these researchers come from academic institutions across the United States. And so here, if you look at this map, dark blue is where we currently have awardees. If you're in one of these lighter blue states, please apply. We're trying to definitely have representation across the United States. Now onto the fellowship programs. So currently we have 3 fellowship programs for postdocs. Today we're going to focus on the Damon Runyon St. Jude Pediatric Cancer Research Fellowship Award, but I did want to touch on the other 2 briefly, just so that everyone in the room is aware. So while each fellowship varies in its mission and research focus, all are meant to support young trainees. And so primarily, we focus on capturing postdocs who are early in their career and new to the postdoc lab. We have a little bit more flexibility if you are a board eligible MD. And so thinking about, we are a cancer research, but we adopt a very broad definition of what we define as cancer research. And so focusing back on the Damon Runyon St. Jude Pediatric Cancer Research Fellowship, how did this award come about? What is the mission of the award program? All of these things are important when you are drafting your application to us. And so our group of scientific advisors and board members noticed that there was a critical gap in funding. And so evidence supports that fewer scientists are focusing on their efforts on the prevention and treatments for childhood cancer due to the lack of funding opportunities in the pediatric oncology space. And so the goal of this award really was to address that critical shortage of scientists by focusing on recruiting the next generation of pediatric cancer researchers by funding them sufficiently. And so this award was made possible through the generous support of St. Jude Children's Research Hospital, and wouldn't be possible without that partnership. Now, we have committee members and current awardees who will talk about some of the qualities of a successful application, but I wanted to quickly touch on two unique aspects of the application. So this is a career mentored award. You apply with a sponsor. And so if you are the applicant, of course, science is paramount, but there are several areas of the application where you get to tell the committee more about you, yourself, your previous research, and sort of the motivation behind you wanting to become a pediatric cancer researcher, as well as your long-term vision for your research program. And so those are also very important when you look at the application as a whole. Now, because this is a mentored award, the committee is also evaluating your sponsor and the research environment. And so there are several areas where you can work with your sponsor. So of course, the sponsor is going to write you a letter of support, but there's also a training plan aspect to the application. And so that training plan should be specific to you and your research goals. And it should also match what you're writing in your statements. And so you can work with your sponsor and talk to him or her and talk to them about what you want for your future so that your training plan reflects that. Very quickly, we have some eligibility and important fellowship dates. So our due date is August 15th. You can apply on Proposal Central. The link is on our website at www.damonrunyon.org. So we have some important eligibility dates here. So if you're a level 1 candidate, so that's if you are a basic researcher or a non-board eligible physician scientist. So if you have a PhD or you're a non-board eligible physician scientist, your degree must have been conferred between February 15th, 2023 and August 15th, 2024. You must have joined your sponsor's lab on or after August 15th, 2023. And then, of course, I just put in here our selection dates so that you're aware. And then you can choose for your award to begin anytime in 2025, January, February, March, or April, not after April. Now, if you are a level 2 candidate or a board eligible physician scientist, you have a little bit more flexibility in your eligibility in that we understand that your training is a little bit more complex. And so you may apply anytime prior to your initial assistant professorship appointment or equivalent. And as such, if you're a postdoc fellow, a clinical fellow, or an instructor, you are eligible to apply. And so quickly, some common questions that we get regarding this fellowship. So if you're an international trainee, we welcome your application as long as you're working at a US institution. Postdoctoral training in the same institution is discouraged. Proposals that are a direct extension of your graduate work will not be funded. The idea here is for you to explore innovative ideas and enter into a new area of science. These fellowship awards are intended for full-time research. If you are a physician scientist, you must devote at least 80% of your time to the Damon Runyon supported research activity. And you're not permitted to hold any other award or grant that supplements the stipend. However, your institution or PI may supplement your stipend. And then so lastly here, you are permitted to obtain additional awards or grants that cover research expenses only. So there are other terms of the award, and they are on our website. Okay, so some of the other benefits to becoming a fellow. If you're a physician scientist and you have medical debt, we have a medical debt repayment plan or repayment program. You're also invited to 2 annual retreats, a Damon Runyon Fellows retreat, as well as a St. Jude specific retreat. We also invite you to participate in Damon Runyon charity events that are held across the country. And we offer a dependent allowance if you are a parent. And so let me sort of just take a step back and focus now on what it's like if you join, if you become a Damon Runyon Fellow. And so awardees join a scientifically rich community that offers many opportunities, from just the scientific freedom to study what you're truly passionate about, built-in mentorship with those retreats, as well as other events, a great group of peers that you're able to collaborate with, we hope from now and then well into the future. Also, there's a nice group of scientists where we're very open to sharing of ideas as well as data. And then, of course, networking with top researchers. And so, as always, it takes a team to produce any great award like this. So here at Damon Runyon, this is our team here. As I mentioned before, Dr. Lee is on the call. She's President and Chief Executive Officer of Damon Runyon. We have Claire Cahill, Chief Administrative Officer, myself. We have two great support staff here, Programs Manager Shannon Donovan, as well as Programs Coordinator Sarah Jordy, as well as a new member to the team, Tara Jackson. As always, if you email awards@damonrunyon.org, you will get a response from one of us. And lastly, please take a little snapshot of the QR code if you would like to receive emails about our awards programs. Great. And so with that, I will stop sharing and hand it over to our esteemed committee. Dr. Kong?
Sure, Megan, thank you. I want to welcome everyone on the call today and really thank you for your interest in pursuing this award. I think to underscore a point that Megan just made, I've been involved with Damon Runyon for nearly a decade now. And I think that Damon Runyon as an organization is quite unique, and the award programs are quite unique. And hopefully you got a feel from what Megan described that it's almost more like joining a family, and no other granting mechanism that I know of helps support some of the additional sort of challenges that many young investigators face. And certainly Damon Runyon has committed itself to really be supportive of young investigators through all of the challenges that being a young investigator really brings. So I am the chair of the review committee, and I thought what might be useful is just to describe and demystify a little bit sort of what goes on behind closed doors when we are reviewing your applications. The review criteria are laid out in the RFA, and Megan described them as well. I would say that the review committee is very broad in terms of the expertise that's represented. And so we always try to match grants to people with domain-specific expertise for scientific, review purposes. But the other thing I would say is that we're a nice group of people. Pediatricians are always the nicest kind of researchers and physicians in any room. And I would say it's a real pleasure to work with all the members of the committee. And, the dynamic is such, there are many review committees that are looking for reasons not to give you money. And I would say that we're a group of people passionate about pediatric cancer, but we're really looking for the reasons to give you the money. And so to specifically go through what the review criteria are, as Megan said, first and foremost, the science is critical, and all the sort of teachings about how to write a good hypothesis-driven grant proposal certainly applies to the review of these grants as well. And so certainly pay a lot of attention to the science that you're writing. Is it hypothesis-driven? Is it original in terms of what it seeks to answer? Do you describe your experiments in a way that makes it clear to us that these experiments are feasible, but also address the underlying question that you're posing? And, those are the sort of usual criteria that you all know about in terms of reviewing science. Um, we do also consider, because this is a career development award, not only you as a candidate, but also your mentor, your sponsor. And importantly, within this, a well-articulated plan in terms of how you will be trained, how your career will be developed is part of the assessment. And so I think do pay a lot of attention to that. Certainly sort of applications that just have a letter that say, this person will present in lab meetings. That's not good enough. Be very specific. Is there coursework? Are there seminar series? Are there conferences? Are there publication plans, et cetera? I think the more detailed you can be, the more confidence the committee will have that this is actually a well thought out and articulated research plan. The third area that you're evaluated on, sort of beyond the science and the candidate, is the research environment. Are the experiments that you propose well supported by the environment that you're in? Is the environment supportive of you gaining new skills? And here, obviously, all of you are at a specific institution, but I think the important point is, you really should reach out sometimes beyond your own institution, but certainly beyond your own department, to bring in additional collaborators, mentors, et cetera, to really strengthen the environment beyond just the lab that you're in. And so that's sort of the third sphere. The fourth sphere is really one that is of great importance. And so the order is not meant to convey a order of priority, but because this is specifically an award meant to address a gap in pediatric cancer research funding, the relevance of your application to pediatric cancer research is really important. And I would say that this is something that should be imbibed into all aspects of your application. And so not only make clear how the science is relevant to pediatric cancers, but also your own commitment to pediatric cancer research. We're really interested in funding not only projects that are relevant to pediatric cancer, but more importantly, people that are committing themselves to pediatric cancer research. So, that's really what goes on, and those are the points of discussion in the committee. And I just wanted to sort of demystify the process a little bit. So I'll pass the baton on to maybe Mark. I see you in the grid, and so I'll call on you to be next.
All right, great. I'm Mark Hatley from St. Jude in Memphis, and that was a great overview, Andrew. And so I think, thinking about the award and the last cycle and going through the selection and things, I think going back to some of the slides that Megan showed really kind of rang some truth to me about like kind of the whole process. And like I love this like the brave and bold science. And so really strive to do something to push yourself and really be transformative. That's what this is about. And so without that component of the science aspect, your application could really fall flat. So really try to do something bold, like really, high risk, high reward is exactly what this is about. And then the other thing that kind of really comes out is that exactly what Andrew said, we're all pediatricians, or pediatric researchers, so we're really rose-colored glasses type of people, And we really advocate for the application. So it could almost get, you know, like this application is better than your application. And so everyone's very excited about these, trying to champion people. And so really you want to, every aspect of the application is important. And the reviewers will find strengths anywhere in that. Like your personal statement, I mean, I can't tell you how many times we're talking about like, oh my gosh, you would not believe this story. And you know, those things really ring true. And it shows that, you know, if there's something that is your driving factor for why you're here and doing what you want to do, I mean, you need to tell us. And so those things are very important. And so your motivation and journey and your personal statement, showing resilience, drive, and kind of why you do what you do is something that would really ring true to the reviewers. And then the mentoring and environment aspects really cannot be understated. This is not just, you can, from the other slide that Megan showed at the beginning, I mean, you could see that they are interested in funding not just like the next R01 applicant, they're funding the leaders and drivers of the field. And so they want to see that you have all the tools and have been very thoughtful and put a lot of intention towards how you're going to develop your career so that you can be that leader and really be one of the people at the driving front edge of pediatric cancer research. So those things matter a lot. And so if you have a junior investigator that's doing exactly what you want to do, is doing really bold science, but may have a little bit less experience, mentoring or transitioning people to junior faculty, then get a co-mentor. Really think creative about how to really fill out that in a very thoughtful, meticulous way. Yeah, that's all I have. I'm going to pass the baton. And the other aspect of this award is the camaraderie and the collegiality and collaboration that you're going to develop with the other awardees. And that was really evident at the St. Jude retreat. These people came from, across the country, different labs, different places, and they just bonded, immediately started sharing ideas, talking science. It also was a way for them to ask questions to people outside of their own institution that they normally wouldn't ask. I remember I got asked a lot of questions about career stuff that they probably didn't ask people at home. And so that was fantastic. And just as a disclosure, Dr. McGee and I actually met in a similar type of organization like 16, 17 years ago and have been, friends ever since. And so these bonds you form now will, live with you forever. Jeff.
So really 17 years ago. I think you guys hit all the highlights as far as the grants and the application recommendations. I guess without belaboring it too much, I think the primacy of the pediatric cancer aspect really can't be overstated here. I think there were a few scientifically very strong applications that were just not deemed responsive to the RFA last year, just because, for example, if it's on AML, but the mutations that you're studying are all found in adults and they're not really relevant to the pediatric disease, you really have to figure out how you're going to make the case then for why this should be funded by a pediatric mechanism. I think also with regards to the environment, some people are coming out of labs that have a clearly established history of pediatric cancer work. And so the case that it's pediatrics doesn't need to be is a little bit easier to see. So if you're coming out of, and I don't want this to sound then exclusive to the labs that don't have a history in pediatric cancer work, but if you're going to come from that lab, look for ways to build collaborations or look for ways to build relationships with people who are doing pediatric cancer work so that you can, more clearly establish that trajectory for your career. Because I think that's come up a couple of times in the reviews. And then Mark touched on the personal statements. Those actually did carry the day for some applications when we were trying to figure out, who we could fund. So pay attention to that. Don't just fill it with boilerplate language. So anyways, yeah, it's a great program.
Great, thank you. But quickly before we move on, talking about sort of demystifying the process, would one of you like to sort of touch on sort of the process of the review. So, for example, once Damon Runyon sees the applications, we check them for eligibility and then we hand them over to you for review. Does anyone want to quickly just kind of talk about, reviewing the actual application, then sort of the discussion as well?
Sure, I'll be happy to do that. So, after Damon Runyon sort of validates and makes sure all the components are there, the review committee members actually get a list of the applications. We are excluded from reviewing those that we have a conflict of interest in, such as individuals in our own institution, or if we're the PI or the mentor, et cetera. And then we go through and just looking primarily at the abstract, we'll sort of rank order the applications as sort of whether we have the expertise, scientific expertise to review those grants. And so the Damon Runyon folks will then make assignments on that basis to make sure we're aligned between what the reviewers are reviewing and the science being proposed. In every application, we'll have a primary and a secondary. So 2 reviewers that go through every single detail of the grant. And we review these, and then all the high priority, meaning the ones that rise to the top, are then brought forward to the complete study section. And at that point, the complete study section actually has access to all the grants. And when we actually sit in committee in study section, the discussions of each individual application are led by the 2 primary and secondary reviewers, but all committee members will chime in and be part of the discussion. And after discussion, there is every committee member then assigns a score. The scores then are aggregated after discussing all of the reviews, and a rank order list is made. And then a funding decision will be made based on how many grants are able to be supported by the Damon Runyon and St. Jude funding. And, it's not, we always start these review meetings by sort of asking, well, how many can we fund? And the answer we always get is, let's figure out how many should be funded, and then we'll have a discussion around it. So I can't really give you a hard number because there's some fungibility, and sometimes scores, partition, where it's clear these are the X number that separate itself from everybody else. Sometimes there's a little bit of it's a little close in terms of where that dividing line is, and then we see if we can figure out a way to actually extend it to a more natural break line. So that's how the process works. And again, just to underscore a comment before, I really think the committee is full of people who are very strong advocates for you. So
Great, thank you. So now we'll sort of switch gears and hear from our current awardees. This was the inaugural class of the Damon Runyon St. Jude Pediatric Cancer Research Fellowship Award. So we're thrilled to hear from you today. And if you don't mind, I'll just, because you're first in my grid, I'll call on Costanza, please.
Hi, everyone. As Megan said, I'm Costanza. I work at the Dana-Farber Cancer Institute / Boston Children's Hospital in the lab of Dr. Mariella Philbin. And my work focuses primarily on diffuse midline gliomas, which are deadly childhood brain tumors for which we've made no therapeutic progress over the past couple of decades. I focus on understanding how these tumors evolve in response to radiotherapy, which is the mainstay treatment for these kids. However, these tumors are highly radioresistant to radiation, and the focus of my grant was to study the development of radioresistance in these childhood brain tumors from a completely new lens, which is to understand how these brain tumor cells co-opt or hijack interactions with the normal brain microenvironment to develop resistance to radiotherapy. So in addition to being like a new way of looking at this problem, it was also a completely new research avenue in my lab, which touches on the benefit of becoming an applicant, is to really kind of push the boundaries not only of your field, but what you're capable of doing in your lab. My lab is primarily a single-cell genomics lab, but I had an interest in using that technology to understanding interactions between tumor cells and the normal brain microenvironment in the context of treatment resistance. So I think Damon Runyon has allowed me to pursue not only high-risk ideas, but also the freedom of opening a completely new research direction in my lab, for which I thankfully have the tools and resources to do so at Dana-Farber. In terms of any advice I would give to applicants, and I think several people have touched on this already, is to, obviously it's a huge package to work on many documents, but in addition to the grant, which is obviously a big portion of your application, I truly spent a significant, if not an equal amount of time working on my personal statement. Do a lot of introspection. It's just one page, but writing that one page took me just as long as writing the 6-page scientific proposal. So be true to yourself, think what makes you unique, what got you to where you're now and why you're applying for this award, and be honest. I wrote a very unique story that I think maybe wasn't too relevant to it's a story I had never told in other grants I had applied for, but I decided, this is me, this is who I am, and hopefully the committee will appreciate how this different story, my background, led me to why I'm studying childhood cancer. In addition to that, I'd say another really nice aspect of being a fellow is these annual retreats that we get to go to. Most recently, we're all at St. Jude, where I got to meet not only some of the fantastic faculty there, but also the amazing awardees, and make really meaningful connections, both professionally, academically, and also new friendships that I hope will last a very long time. And yeah, so that's all I have to say for now.
Great, thank you. So yeah, I hope in 17 years you and Phil will call you back for one of these. Okay, I'll switch it over. Phil, would you like to give us your thoughts?
Hi, everyone. My name is Phil. I am, until last week, I was a clinical fellow in pediatric oncology and bone marrow transplant. And as of this week, I'm starting as a clinical instructor, but I'm also a postdoc fellow in Wendell Lim's lab here. So we broadly in the lab use synthetic biology to develop new ways to engineer cells for to understand basic biology, but also to develop new tools for therapies. And I am the one and only pediatrician in the lab, and so my work is focused on enhancing CAR-T-based therapies for pediatric leukemia, which is something that I see a lot of in the clinic. And so we're trying to use synthetic biology approaches to enhancing how CAR-T cells recognize and eliminate tumor cells. So, the Damon Runyon Foundation support is really, the money, of course, is great. It's really helpful in a field like pediatric oncology, where there's really not that much in terms of, access to support for you in the early stages of your career. It's really great to have this as a resource to, help you get established and maintain your protected research time and not get pulled towards the clinic. And I'll second what Costanza said. It's really, the connections that we were all able to make at this retreat, even just a few months into the program, that was really, a great time, and sort of helped to expand the scientific network for all of us who were there. And it was really great to see everything that's going on at St. Jude's and all the resources there. And, it's really one of the sort of paradises of pediatric oncology research. And so getting connected to that is really, I think, really useful for those with an interest in pediatric oncology. So, yeah, I think that's maybe what I have to say.
Okay, fantastic. So if there are no other remarks from our panelists, we will now invite attendees to send us questions. You can either unmute yourself and ask directly, or you can write in the chat, and I'll sort of then feed those questions to our panelists. But while you're sort of typing those questions or thinking about them, we did receive a few very early on and once we opened up the application cycle. And so I'll just start with two questions that we've already had from potential applicants. And this is something that was already lightly touched on during the mini presentations. So the question about if your PI is more junior, but you're doing very exciting, innovative work, what advice do you have? What sort of tangible advice do you have when selecting a co-mentor? And then, so that's part one. If you're picking a co-mentor, what advice do you have for choosing that? And part two is, when is the PI not junior anymore? So how do you sort of know when the PI has graduated into a more senior role and you do not need that co-mentor?
I've never really held the standing of the PI in that regard as being junior or senior, for or against candidates too much. I think what matters more, I mean, obviously, if a PI has a track record of having people come out of their lab and become successful faculty descendants, that helps to a degree, except I mean, it's hard to establish that track record, even if you're at senior level. And so I don't think that can be too great of a criteria. I think what matters more is that the PI is really clearly demonstrating a commitment to the candidate's career growth. And that comes through in the letter, and it comes through in the career development plan. At least to me as a reviewer, seeing that there's an intentional career development plan matters more than whether your PI has tenure or not. I guess, it never hurts to develop some level of co-mentorship. And I guess, that can be achieved in a number of different ways. Sometimes you're looking for somebody who can fill in a gap in terms of expertise, especially if your PI isn't not primarily focused on pediatric cancer. I think the other thing is that sometimes it can be that PI, that junior faculty PI's mentor, who's actually then, demonstrating some responsibility for bringing them along their trajectory. But of the things that I'd evaluate, I wouldn't list that as my primary criterion for selecting or not selecting an application or determining that somebody's on a good trajectory. I can't speak for the other two on this panel.
Well, I mean, I agree with Jeff. I mean, it probably wouldn't be the linchpin, but I think probably it'd be beneficial to think about it outside of just what's advantageous for getting a successful application. But how are you going to position yourself for the future and to optimize your success? And I think that's what the awards and the application's trying to assess. And so if you're in a junior person's lab who really hasn't transitioned a lot of people, then you're going to need somebody who kind of knows how to get that done. But as well, most of the applications that were successful had established mentorship committees. So they established kind of like your thesis committee in graduate school. So a committee of people that will serve to kind of help oversee your career development and also be points of expertise for your project. And so that's a really good way to kind of fill in gaps, is to have a very thoughtful, intentional mentorship committee that can help guide that process. And I would just encourage you that to actually do it and not just use it as a way to put something on paper to get an application, but those activities are actually incredibly advantageous for you. And those are the people that you'll establish relationships with, that could write you letters of recommendation for your job and these types of things. So a mentorship committee that can kind of fill gaps is a good way to circumvent this.
Okay, so I'm going to paraphrase the next one, so forgive me. So this idea of an innovative idea or really pushing the boundary, funding brave and bold. So how, because our eligibility requires that the level 1 candidate be so new to the lab, they may not have a lot of preliminary idea to back up this really exciting novel project. So what advice, and I think both awardees and committee members can ask this, what advice do you have for the applicant that has a really strong idea that could lead to a breakthrough, but maybe doesn't have all that preliminary data just because they haven't been in the lab long enough to generate it?
I guess I could go first because this was one of my biggest concerns when I applied. In fact, I think I applied for the award a month and a half after I joined the lab. So I generated nothing. However, I think what I ended up using was, I formulated my hypothesis and ideas based off of published data from my lab. Obviously, I think I did some bare gene expression analysis, to include as the only new piece of preliminary data. But I really would say try to design your experiments in a feasible manner where you're clearly building off of different existing data that may or may not connect to each other. I think, funding risky ideas come with a risk that they might not pan out the way you think they might. So it's not a matter of nailing everything to make sure it will work, but rather just, are you gonna test something, are you phrasing, are you making a testable hypothesis with some sort of evidence? But none of the data I had included in my grant was something I had generated in just a month or a couple months of being in the lab. It was more what do you propose to do? That's where you can, I think I had included a section where I said, if this doesn't work, then I'll try this. And so pitfalls and limitations. So I wouldn't worry too much. I think I really had little data, actually include schematics for how my experiments would work out. It's a matter of do you have the methods? Can you develop those methods? Do you have the right connections to do so? So I really, in my case, I was worried about it, but clearly everything was okay. So.
Great. So we have another question. So one of our guidelines states that we discourage you from remaining at the same institution. And so if we can hear from the committee members, if you could elaborate on an exception to that rule. So, for example, what would an applicant need to do to be successful in their application if they are remaining at the same institution as their graduate work?
I think yeah, I'm trying to recall whether this is whether this came up in our discussions last year or not. I don't think it did. It's a guideline, and I think that it's something that there's a reason for it, right? You're trying to get people who wanna, part of being ambitious also means changing your environments and taking on things that maybe make you a little uncomfortable. Now, sometimes people do have family reasons or other personal reasons why they need to stay in the same place. And so your personal statement is available to you to explain that and make that case. But then it's also incumbent on you to explain why this is going to be an ambitious new direction. And even if you're changing labs, how are you actually making yourself a little uncomfortable and actually taking on something new and big, as opposed to just continuing on a pathway that's already sort of, a path of least resistance, because it sort of goes back to the underlying premise for the whole award, that these are supposed to be ambitious awards, at least. And to me, there's that's an element of the mindset, is that I'm trying to take on something new. Every institution that you go to is a prism where the light bends, and you start going in different directions than you otherwise thought you were when you showed up there. And if you're not going to make the move to a new institution, you at least need to show to us how the light's going to bend within the context of your own institution. Is that fair, Mark and Andrew? I don't want to speak
Yeah,
up.
I mean, I think that's fair. I mean, I don't think that it is meant to discourage people from staying at their same institution, but rather it's an extension of the fact that we want to support your growth, your your personal and career growth. And so along the same lines that the research should not be a continuation of your graduate research or research you did before, it's the same thing. But a lot of us work at very large institutions. And so, if you're switching departments, if I would say it would be very, very hard to counsel somebody to to do their postdoc in their graduate school, under their graduate mentor. And so as a fundamental sort of moving on to the next thing is sort of, I think what that comment is meant to encapsulate, but it's not a hard and fast rule. And I think just as Jeff said, in your personal statement, make clear why this is the right place for you to grow and expand, not just continue on in doing what you were doing before.
We have one more brief question. And so this is sort of about the scope of what the award funds. And so I think we chose two awardees who have very different projects. And so talking to the panelists here, if you could just sort of, what types of projects are you looking to fund? More basic, more translational, or it really is just the exciting science and everything under that umbrella would work?
Yes. Exciting, rigorous science that's related to pediatric cancer. I mean, I don't think we were selective or like bending towards any one thing. It was kind of the whole package as we've been discussing.
I think the portfolio was pretty broad too. We had some immunotherapies, some basic biology. We had some.
Right.
I don't think we had as many applicants doing clinical science, and so yeah.
Yeah, but I think to that point, the funding certainly can't cover what it takes to fund a clinical trial. And what probably doesn't work is to say you want to be the PI of a phase 1 trial, and the hypothesis is that this drug is tolerable, right? So that's not, at the end of the day, a real scientific hypothesis. And so if you are more in the clinical realm, sort of highly incisive correlative biology studies from samples from a clinical trial would be more aligned with sort of the type of science that we're funding. So it's not that you can't be doing clinical studies, because being able to do the experiment in the ultimate experimental system, the human, is very much within scope. But it is that the studies have to be driving towards a mechanistic sort of understanding and gaining new knowledge, not just testing, quote, feasibility.
Yep. Well, fantastic. And so I want to thank all of our panelists here today. Thank you for sharing your experiences on the selection committee, as well as on the flip side, applying for the award. And I want to thank all of the attendees. And please, if you have any additional questions, you can email us directly, or you can send an email to awards@damonrunyon.org. And we'd be happy to answer any one of your questions. And so once again, thank you all.